Marcus Webb stood on the sidewalk in front of his own house, holding a piece of paper that made his blood boil. An eviction notice, not for the criminals inside his home. For him, the squatters had actually filed legal paperwork claiming that he was trespassing on their property. And through his living room window, Marcus could see them celebrating. One guy raised a beer bottle and laughed. Another one flipped him off. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus was 58 years old, United States Marine Corps, retired, 2 tours in Iraq, Purple Heart recipient, right leg held together with more metal than bone, courtesy of an IED outside Fallujah that had ended his military career and left him with a limp he'd carry for the rest of his life. He'd bought this house in Riverside, Pennsylvania with his disability payments and savings. Spent 5 years fixing every crack, painting every wall, replacing the roof with his own 2 hands despite the pain. This was his castle, his refuge, his home. And now con artists with forged documents and fake smiles were trying to steal it out from under him while the legal system told him to wait. What those squatters didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that Marcus had made one phone call last night to a man named Frank Hammer Dalton. A man Marcus had served with 20 years ago in the Marines. A man who now led the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, the largest brotherhood of veteran riders in 3 states. And in exactly 48 hours, 300 bikers were going to roll down Pinewood Drive and teach these criminals a lesson about what happens when you steal from a United States Marine. The storm was coming. It had started 4 days ago, on a Tuesday morning. Marcus had driven to the Veterans Affairs Hospital for what was supposed to be a routine appointment. Another set of x-rays, on the titanium rod and 6 screws holding his shattered femur together. Another conversation with a VA doctor who looked at his file for 30 seconds before prescribing the same pain medication that barely took the edge off. "Mr. Webb, the hardware is holding fine," the doctor had said, not looking up from his computer screen. "Continue with physical therapy and your current medication regimen." Marcus had wanted to say that the hardware felt like broken glass grinding inside his leg every morning. That some nights the pain woke him up, and he had to sit in a hot bath at 3 a.m. just to stop shaking. That fine wasn't fine at all, but he'd learned years ago that complaining to VA doctors got you nowhere except labeled as difficult. So he just nodded, collected his prescriptions, and limped back to his truck. The whole trip took 6 hours. 6 hours away from his house. That's all the time they needed. When Marcus turned on a Pinewood Drive at 4:30 p.m., his instincts immediately screamed that something was wrong. A white cargo van, with no license plates, sat in his driveway. His driveway, and his front door, the solid oak door he'd refinished himself, stood wide open. Marcus killed the engine and sat there for a moment, his hand instinctively reaching for a sidearm that wasn't there anymore. Old habits from Iraq. The feeling that danger was close and you needed to be ready. He grabbed his cane, a sturdy aluminum one that doubled as a weapon if needed, and approached his house. The sound of voices and laughter drifted through the open door. Marcus stepped inside and froze. 4 people were in his living room. 2 men and 2 women, all in their 30s, moving his furniture around like they were redecorating. His couch had been pushed against the wall. His coffee table moved. Karen's antique lamp, the one her grandmother had given them, now sat in a different corner. "Hey!" Marcus's voice came out like a drill sergeant's command. "What the hell is going on?" Well, all 4 people turned to look at him. None of them looked surprised or guilty. They looked annoyed that he'd interrupted them. The taller man stepped forward. He had a shaved head, a spider web tattoo crawling up his neck, and the kind of smile that made Marcus's fists clench. This guy was trouble. Marcus had seen enough criminals in his life to recognize one instantly. "Can we help you?" Spider Tattoo asked, his tone mocking. Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. "Can I help you? This is my house. Who the hell are you people?" A woman with bleached blonde hair, fake nails, and too much makeup stepped forward holding a manila folder. She wore yoga pants and a tank top that said, "Boss Babe," across the chest. "Sir," she said in a voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This property was legally transferred to us 2 weeks ago through a property acquisition program. We're the new owners." "Transferred?" Marcus felt like someone had punched, like him in the gut. I didn't transfer anything. I own this house. I've lived here for 12 years. Spider Tattoo pulled papers from the folder and held them out. According to our documentation, you signed over the deed on August 3rd as part of a veteran property relief program. Everything's legal and processed through Riverside County. Marcus snatched the papers, his hands shaking with rage. The documents looked official. County stamps, notary seals, legal language he could barely parse through the red haze, clouding his vision, and there at the bottom was a signature that looked disturbingly close to his own handwriting. But he'd never seen these papers before in his life. I never signed this, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. The same tone he'd used before combat. I never signed anything. This is fraud. The second man, younger with sleeve tattoos and a smirk that needed to be punched off his face, laughed. Dude, you probably forgot. You're what, 60? Old. People forget stuff all the time. I'm 58, Marcus growled. And I didn't forget. Someone forged my signature. Sir, blonde woman said, her fake smile never wavering. I understand this is emotional. Many veterans struggle when they participate in property relief programs. But this is for the greater good, helping veterans transition to more manageable housing situations. I don't need to transition anywhere. Get out of my house. Spider Tattoo's smile disappeared. Actually, sir, legally this is our house now, and we're going to have to ask you to leave. If you have concerns about the transfer, you're welcome to file a dispute with the county clerk's office. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. Officer Patricia Gomez arrived 25 minutes later with her partner, a rookie named Officer Hayes, who looked like he'd graduated from the police academy last week. Marcus stood on his own front lawn like a trespasser, while the four squatters remained comfortably inside his house. Through the window, he could see them sitting on his furniture, drinking what was probably his beer, acting like they owned the place. Because according to the paperwork, they did. Mr. Webb, Officer Gomez said after examining the forged documents, and Marcus could hear the frustration in her voice. I understand what you're saying, but these papers appear legitimate. County stamps, notary seals, everything looks official. It's forgery, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. I never signed those documents. Someone stole my identity. Officer Hayes shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we can't determine forgery at the scene. That requires document analysis, handwriting experts, court proceedings. So you're just going to let criminals stay in my house? Officer Gomez's expression was genuinely sympathetic, but her hands were tied. Mr. Webb, without evidence of a crime we can act on right now, this is a civil property dispute. You'll need to file paperwork with the county, probably get a lawyer, and go through the legal process. How long will that take? The pause before she answered told Marcus everything he needed to know. Could be weeks, maybe months if they contest it. The courts are really backed up right now. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. Months. These criminals could live in his house for months while he fought through red tape and legal proceedings he couldn't afford. So they just win? His voice came out hollow. I'm sorry, Officer Gomez said quietly. And she genuinely seemed sorry. The law protects tenant rights, even when those tenants might be criminals. Without proof, we can act on immediately. Our hands are tied. As the police cruiser pulled away, Spider Tattoo appeared in the doorway of Marcus's house. Hey, Marine, he called out, his voice mocking. You should probably clear out. This is private property now. Don't want to have to call the cops on you for trespassing. Behind him, the other three squatters laughed. The blonde woman raised her beer bottle in a mock toast. Thanks for the house, old man. It's real nice. Marcus stood there on the sidewalk, a 8-year-old disabled combat veteran who'd survived IEDs and firefights and watched friends die in the desert, and he'd never felt more helpless in his entire life. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen from 3 doors down. Marcus, what's happening? Who are those people? Marcus didn't know how to answer that. How do you explain that criminals can steal your home with fake paperwork, and there's nothing anyone can do about it? He sat in his truck for a long time, just staring at his house. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Through the living room window, he could see the squatters moving around, settling in, making themselves at home in his space. That's when Marcus remembered Frank Dalton. Hammer. They'd served together in Iraq, 2003. Frank had been a sergeant. Marcus, corporal. They'd survived the push to Baghdad together, slept in the same sandstorm-filled tents, pulled security on the same convoys. Frank had carried Marcus 200 yards after the IED hit, kept pressure on his wounds until the medevac arrived. "I got you, brother," Frank had said while Marcus screamed in pain. "I got you. You're not dying today." After they'd both gotten out, Frank had started a motorcycle club for veterans, the Iron Wolves. Marcus had gone to a few meetings early on, but his leg made riding difficult and eventually he drifted away from the group. But Frank had always said, "You need anything, you call. Brotherhood doesn't expire." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number. His thumb hovered over it. Was he really going to do this? Call in the bikers? He looked at his house again, at the strangers inside it. He pressed call. Frank answered on the second ring. "Marcus Webb. Been a long time, brother." "Frank," Marcus said, and his voice cracked. "I need help." The Iron Wolves clubhouse sat on the outskirts of Riverside, a converted warehouse with motorcycles lined up outside like chrome soldiers standing at attention. Marcus hadn't been here in almost 3 years. But the moment he limped through the door at 8 p.m. that same night, it felt like coming home. The place smelled like motor oil, leather, and the kind of strong coffee that could wake the dead. Motorcycle parts and tools covered workbenches along the walls. An American flag hung beside a POW MIA banner, and sitting around a massive wooden table scarred with years of use were men Marcus had fought beside, bled beside, and trusted with his life. Frank "Hammer" Dalton stood up first. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4", 250 pounds of solid muscle, with a gray beard that reached his chest and eyes that had seen too much war. The president patch on his leather vest marked him as the leader of the Iron Wolves. "Marcus," Frank's handshake turned into a crushing hug. "Good to see you, brother. Wish it was under better circumstances." Around the table, other faces Marcus recognized nodded in greeting. Tommy "Wrench" Rodriguez, missing 2 fingers from his left hand, courtesy of a Taliban grenade. Carlos "Ghost" Martinez, the quietest man Marcus had ever met, who still didn't talk much about what happened to him in Kandahar. David "Doc" Patterson, former Army medic who now worked at the VA and had probably saved more lives in field hospitals than most doctors save in their entire careers. And 8 others, all veterans, all riders, all brothers. "What's going on, Marcus?" Frank asked, gesturing to a chair. "You sounded bad on the phone." Marcus dropped the forged documents on the table like they were contaminated. "Someone stole my house." The room went silent. "The hell you say?" Wrench muttered, picking up the papers. Marcus explained everything. Coming home from the VA. Finding strangers in his house. The fake paperwork. The police saying it was a civil matter. His voice shook with rage as he described the squatters laughing at him, mocking him, raising beer bottles in celebration, while he stood on his own front lawn like a beggar. Doc picked up the documents, his medic's careful hands smoothing the pages. "Property Acquisition Program," he read aloud. "Veterans Relief Initiative. Anyone heard of this?" Heads shook around the table. Frank's face had gone dark, the kind of dark that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Marcus, you said there were 4 of them?" "Yeah. 2 men, 2 women. The main guy has a spider web tattoo on his neck. Real piece of work. They're treating my house like it's a vacation rental." Ghost spoke up, his voice quiet but carrying weight. "This isn't random. This is a scam, probably targeting veterans specifically." "Why veterans?" someone asked. "Because we're seen as vulnerable," Doc said bitterly. "Older, possibly disabled, living alone. The system assumes we're confused or struggling with PTSD. Makes it easier to exploit us." Frank pulled out his phone and started typing. "Let me make some calls. I know people." While Frank stepped outside, the other bikers gathered closer, examining the forged paperwork. "This notary stamp," Wrench said, squinting at the document. "Looks off to me. The font's wrong." "You know what notary stamps are supposed to look like?" Marcus asked. "My ex-wife was a notary." Saw enough of these during the divorce. Wrench grinned without humor. This is fake. I'd bet my bike on it. Frank came back inside, his expression grim. Just talked to Danny over in Millerton. He remembers hearing about something similar happening to a Vietnam vet last year. Property scam targeting veterans. They dropped the case when the vet's lawyer threatened to expose them publicly. So, they're doing this to multiple people? Marcus felt sick. Probably dozens, Frank said. They target vets who can't afford lawyers, who don't have family watching their backs, who the system will write off as confused or unstable. He placed his massive hands flat on the table. They picked the wrong Marine this time. Carlos leaned forward. What's the play? Frank looked around at his brothers. We ride. To do what? Doc asked. We can't just drag them out of the house. That's assault. We get arrested. We don't need to drag them out, Frank said, his smile predatory. We just need to show up. Make them understand that Marcus isn't alone, that he has family, that we're watching. Wrench grinned. I love it when we make house calls. This stays legal, Frank said firmly. We're not criminals. We're not vigilantes. We show up, we document everything, and we make it clear these squatters made a mistake. He pulled out his phone and opened the Iron Wolves group chat, 42 members strong. How many you thinking? Marcus asked. Frank's thumbs flew across his screen. All of them. The group chat exploded with activity. Hammer. Brothers and sisters. We have a situation. Marine vet had his house stolen by squatters with forged documents. Police won't help. We ride tomorrow, 10 a.m. This is not optional. Drop what you're doing. We take care of our own. The responses came immediately. Wrench. I'm in. Doc. What's the address? Ghost. On my way to the clubhouse now. Maria. These the same scammers from last year? Tommy. Count me in. What do you need? Within 20 minutes, all 42 members of the Iron Wolves had confirmed they'd be there. But Frank wasn't done. He made calls to other clubs. Veterans motorcycle clubs across Pennsylvania. The Road Warriors in Philadelphia. The Steel Horse Regiment in Pittsburgh. The Liberty Riders in Harrisburg. This is Hammer with the Iron Wolves, Frank said into his phone. We've got a Marine who had his home stolen by squatters. Con artists with forged papers. Police won't act. We're riding tomorrow to support him. You in? The answer was always the same. How many do you need? By midnight, the commitment list had grown to over 150 bikers from 6 different clubs. Marcus sat at the table, overwhelmed. Frank, I can't ask you to do this. You didn't ask, Frank said simply. Brothers don't ask. They just show up. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You carried a rifle for this country. You took shrapnel defending people you never met. You think we're going to let some criminals steal your home and do nothing? What if it doesn't work? It'll work, Wrench said confidently. Trust me, we've done this before. Not for home theft, but for other situations where brothers needed backup. Sometimes presence is enough. Doc was already on his laptop, researching property law. Pennsylvania's squatter laws are complicated, but if we can prove the documents are forged, this becomes criminal fraud. That changes everything. How do we prove it? Marcus asked. We document everything, Doc said. Photos, videos, witness statements. We make this so public. They can't hide. And we find other victims because I guarantee Marcus isn't the first person they've done this to. Frank looked at Marcus. Go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow morning, you're going to have an army behind you. Home? Marcus laughed bitterly. I don't have a home right now. You can stay here, Frank said. We've got a back room with a cot. It's not much, but it's enough, Marcus said quietly. Thank you. As the bikers filed out to their motorcycles, engines rumbling to life in the parking lot, Frank pulled Marcus aside. That IED in Fallujah, Frank said. When I carried you to that medevac, you know what you said to me? Marcus shook his head. He didn't remember much from that day, except the pain. You said, "Don't leave me behind, brother. Don't leave me behind." Frank's eyes were fierce. I didn't leave you behind then. I'm sure as hell not leaving you behind now. Marcus lay on the cot in the back room of the clubhouse, staring at the ceiling. His leg throbbed. The pain medication had worn off hours ago, but he didn't want to take more. He needed to be sharp tomorrow. Through the thin walls, he could hear bikers still arriving. More engines, more voices. The Brotherhood responding to the call. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor. Mrs. Chen. Marcus. Those people are having a party at your house. Music is very loud. I called police, but they said it's not their problem. I'm so sorry. Marcus closed his eyes. They were celebrating, throwing a party in his home while he slept on a cot in a motorcycle clubhouse. Another text came through. This one from an unknown number. Mr. Webb, this is Jennifer Park with County Legal Aid. I heard about your situation from Officer Gomez. I'd like to help. Call me tomorrow. Then another message in the Iron Wolves group chat. This one from someone named Ray. Just confirmed with reading chapter. They're sending 35 riders, ETA 9:30 a.m. And another. Lancaster Club is in. 28 bikes. The numbers kept growing. Marcus's phone showed 2:47 a.m. when he finally fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of explosions in the desert and strangers laughing in his living room. The thunder rolls and the rumble started at 9:45 a.m. Mrs. Chen heard it first, confused by what sounded like distant thunder, but the sky was clear and blue. Then her windows started vibrating. By 9:50 a.m., the entire neighborhood was coming outside. They came from every direction, a river of chrome and leather flowing toward Pinewood Drive like an unstoppable force of nature. The Iron Wolves led the procession, Frank's black Harley-Davidson at the front with an American flag mounted on the back, rippling in the wind. Behind him rode 42 members of his club in tight formation. But they weren't alone. The reading chapter appeared from the north 35 bikes strong. The Lancaster Club from the east 28 riders. From Philadelphia, the Road Warriors rolled in with 47 motorcycles. The Steel Horse Regiment from Pittsburgh brought 52 bikers. From Harrisburg, the Liberty Riders contributed 41 riders. And more kept coming. Choppers, cruisers, touring bikes, trikes for the older veterans who couldn't balance two wheels anymore. Every bike carried men and women in leather vests, adorned with patches, club names, military unit insignias, POW, MIA symbols, American flags. The sound was deafening, a mechanical roar that shook windows and set off car alarms up and down the street. The synchronized thunder of over 250 engines created a symphony of raw power that you didn't just hear, you felt it in your chest, in your bones, in your soul. Marcus rode in a truck with Frank at the lead. When he saw his street filling with motorcycles, his eyes burned with tears. The bikes lined both sides of Pinewood Drive, forming a steel corridor with Marcus's house at the dead center. Riders dismounted in synchronized silence, killing their engines one by one until the street fell into an eerie, powerful quiet. They stood beside their motorcycles, arms folded across their chests, leather vests displaying their colors. An army of veterans, Vietnam vets with gray beards, Gulf War vets with weathered faces, Iraq and Afghanistan vets with young faces and old eyes. Men and women who'd served in different wars but shared the same code. You don't abandon your brothers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside the house, Marcus could see movement at the windows. Spider Tattoo's face appeared, his confident smirk replaced by wide-eyed shock. The blonde woman joined him, her mouth hanging open. The other two squatters pressed against the windows, staring at the sea of bikers in disbelief. Neighbors poured out of their houses. Mrs. Chen stood on her porch, her hand over her mouth. The Patterson family from 2 doors down came out, with their teenage kids, who immediately started filming on their phones. Mr. Velasquez, the elderly Korean War vet who lived on the corner, walked slowly down his driveway, leaning on his cane, tears streaming down his face as he saluted the assembled riders. Within minutes, a dozen phones were recording. The footage would be viral by noon. Frank climbed out of the truck and helped Marcus to his feet. Together, they walked to the front of the assembled force. Frank raised his hand, and 250 people fell into absolute silence. You could hear birds chirping in the trees, a dog barking 3 blocks away, the whisper of wind through leaves. Then Frank spoke, his voice carrying across the street like a battle command. My name is Frank Dalton, president of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. We're here peacefully, standing on public property, exercising our First Amendment rights." He gestured to Marcus. "This is Marcus Webb, United States Marine Corps, retired, Purple Heart recipient, Iraq War veteran, and the legal owner of that house." Behind me, murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. 4 days ago, Frank continued, criminals with forged documents stole his home. They claimed they owned it through a fake veteran relief program. When Marcus called the police, he was told it was a civil matter. The criminals are inside his house right now, celebrating their theft. The crowd's murmur turned angry. "We're not here for violence," Frank said, raising his hands. "We're not here to break laws. We're here to show these criminals something they didn't count on, that Marcus Webb is not alone, that he has family, that we are watching. And we're not leaving until justice is served." The crowd erupted in approval. The roar from 250 voices shook the street. Mrs. Chin approached Marcus, her elderly face full of emotion. "Marcus, we didn't know what to do. We called the police, but they wouldn't help." "It's okay, Mrs. Chin," Marcus said, his voice thick. She looked at the assembled bikers. "These are good people? The best people," Marcus said. Inside the house, the front door suddenly flew open. Spider Tattoo stepped onto the porch, trying to project confidence, but his hand visibly shook. "This is harassment. You can't do this." Nobody moved. 250 bikers stared back in absolute silence, their faces hard as stone. "I'm calling the police," Spider Tattoo shouted, his voice cracking. "Go ahead," Frank called back calmly. "We're on a public street. We have every right to be here. You're trying to intimidate us." "We're standing," Frank said flatly. "If you feel intimidated by veterans standing on a public street, that sounds like a guilty conscience." A biker Marcus didn't know, an older man with a 101st Airborne patch, spoke up. "You're in a combat veteran's house. A man who served his country. You really want to have this conversation in front of cameras?" Spider Tattoo noticed for the first time all the phones recording. His face went pale. He retreated back inside and slammed the door. The crowd remained. As the morning turned to afternoon, the bikers organized into teams with military precision. Doc and 3 others set up a documentation station. They photographed the house from every angle, interviewed neighbors, collected witness statements about when the squatters arrived and what they'd seen. Mrs. Chin gave a detailed statement. "I saw them break in 4 days ago. They used some kind of tool on the lock. When I called Marcus to warn him, he was at the VA hospital." The Patterson family confirmed they'd seen the squatters throwing Marcus's belongings into trash bags. Mr. Velasquez, the old Korean War vet, provided written testimony about Marcus's character and how long he'd lived there. Maria Ghost Reyes, a former paralegal who now rode with the Liberty Riders, examined the forged documents with expert eyes. "This notary stamp is fake," she announced. "The registration number doesn't match Pennsylvania's notary database. This is criminal fraud." She was already on her phone with the district attorney's office. Wrench and 5 others walked the perimeter of the property, documenting every law the squatters had broken: illegal dumping of Marcus's belongings, property damage to the fence and mailbox, even code violations for trash piled in the backyard. Meanwhile, a media presence had arrived. Channel 7 News pulled up at 11:30 a.m. The reporter, Lisa Chin, approached Frank cautiously. "Mr. Dalton, can you tell us what's happening here?" Frank gave her a detailed explanation, showing her the forged documents, introducing her to Marcus, letting her interview neighbors. Lisa Chen's cameraman captured everything: the sea of bikers, the squatters peeking through curtains, Marcus standing in front of his own house, unable to go inside. "This is Lisa Chen reporting from Riverside," she said into the camera, "where an extraordinary scene is unfolding. Over 250 military veterans on motorcycles have arrived to support Marine Corps veteran Marcus Webb, whose home was allegedly stolen through forged documents. What began as one man's fight for justice has become a brotherhood's call to action." The story aired at noon. By 12:30 p.m., it was viral on social media. By 1 p.m., every major news outlet in Pennsylvania was covering it. Inside the house, the squatters were panicking. At 1:45 p.m., Spider Tattoo made his first mistake. He came out onto the porch and started filming the bikers with his phone, trying to create his own narrative. "This is harassment by a biker gang," he shouted. "We're legal tenants being terrorized." Within seconds, his video was posted to social media. Within minutes, the comments section destroyed him. "Legal tenants? You're squatters with forged documents. Those bikers include teachers, nurses, and combat veterans. Try again. You stole a Purple Heart recipient's home. You get what you deserve. Terrorists? They're standing on a public street. You're the criminal." Spider Tattoo deleted the video, but screenshots had already spread everywhere. At 2:30 p.m., the blonde woman made the second mistake. She emerged from the house and deliberately kicked over a potted plant on the porch, a plant Marcus had carefully tended that Karen had loved before she died. The ceramic pot shattered, dirt spilling everywhere. "Oops," she said loudly, looking directly at the cameras recording her. "Clumsy me." Marcus felt his hands clench into fists, but Frank placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "That's what they want," Frank said quietly. "They want you to lose control. Don't give them that." Doc was already marking it down. "Property destruction, on camera. That's going to the police." At 3 p.m., police cruisers arrived. Officer Gomez and 3 other officers. Marcus's heart sank. Were they going to make the bikers leave? But Officer Gomez walked straight to Frank. "Got multiple calls about a disturbance." "No disturbance, officer," Frank said respectfully. "Just concerned citizens on public property." Officer Gomez looked at the assembled bikers, then at the house, then back at Frank. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Carry on, then. Just keep it peaceful." "Always, ma'am." As Gomez walked back to her cruiser, she paused beside Marcus. "The DA called me. They're fast-tracking your case. With all this media attention and the evidence of forgery, they're treating this as criminal fraud now." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, Mr. Webb, these squatters are done. They just don't know it yet." Marcus felt hope bloom in his chest for the first time in days. At 4 p.m., the squatters tried to leave. Spider Tattoo, the blonde woman, and the other 2 emerged from the house carrying suitcases and trash bags stuffed with items Marcus recognized as his belongings. They made it exactly 10 steps down the driveway before finding themselves facing a wall of leather vests. "Going somewhere?" Wrench asked, arms crossed. "We're leaving," Spider Tattoo said, his voice shaking now. All the bravado was gone. "You got what you wanted. We're going." "The bags," Maria said, stepping forward with her tablet. "Those don't belong to you. This is our stuff." Maria pulled up photos on her screen. "That's a laptop with a Marine Corps sticker visible in photographs from 4 days ago when you dumped Marcus's belongings. That watch you're wearing? That's a military-issue Luminox I can prove Marcus owns. Want to try again?" Spider Tattoo's face went white. He dropped the bags and bolted back into the house. The other 3 followed, slamming the door. At 5:15 p.m., something remarkable happened. A car pulled up, and a woman in a business suit emerged. She introduced herself as Jennifer Park, the attorney from County Legal Aid who texted Marcus. "Mr. Webb, I've been reviewing your case," she said, opening a briefcase. "With the evidence these bikers have collected and the media attention this has gotten, I've convinced a judge to grant an emergency hearing." She smiled. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We're going to get your house back." Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears in his eyes. At 6 p.m., as the sun began to set, more bikers arrived. The count had grown to over 300. They brought food. Someone had organized a food truck to feed everyone. They brought water and coffee. They brought folding chairs for the older veterans who couldn't stand all day. This wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a community, a family taking care of their own. Mrs. Chin brought out a tray of sandwiches for Marcus. The Pattersons brought cookies. Even grumpy old Mr. Henderson, from across the street, who never talked to anyone, came out with a case of bottled water. "For the boys," he said gruffly, gesturing to the bikers. "Thank you for your service." As darkness fell, solar lights were set up. The bikers weren't leaving. They were settling in for the night. Frank stood beside Marcus, watching the scene. How you holding up, brother? I don't know what to say, Marcus admitted. I never expected all of this. You carried a rifle for your country, Frank said simply. You bled for people you never met. You think we're going to let criminals steal your home without a fight? He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. This is what brotherhood means. You don't abandon family. Inside the house, the lights were all on. Through the windows, Marcus could see the squatters packing frantically. They'd figured out they'd lost. The courtroom was packed at 8:45 a.m. the next morning. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with Jennifer Park. Behind him, the gallery was filled with bikers. Frank, Wrench, Doc, Maria, and at least 50 others who'd come to show support. The squatters sat at the defense table with their lawyer, a sweaty man named Brenner who looked like he regretted taking this case. Judge Richardson entered a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Let's make this quick, she said, settling into her chair. I've reviewed the preliminary filings. Mr. Brenner, your clients claim legal tenancy based on a property transfer agreement. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Brenner said nervously. And Mr. Webb claims those documents are forged? Yes, Your Honor, Jennifer Park said confidently. And we have proof. What followed was a systematic destruction of the squatter's case. Jennifer presented the forged notary stamp analysis. The registration number didn't exist in Pennsylvania's database. She presented handwriting analysis, comparing Marcus's real signature to the forged one, not even close. She presented testimony from Mrs. Chin and other neighbors confirming Marcus had lived there for 12 years, and the squatters had only appeared 4 days ago. She presented photographs and videos of the squatters destroying Marcus's property and threatening him. Your Honor, Jennifer said, this isn't a property dispute. This is organized criminal fraud targeting a disabled veteran. Judge Richardson's expression grew colder with each piece of evidence. She turned to Spider Tattoo, whose real name was Kyle Sanders. Mr. Sanders, do you have any documentation proving you legally acquired this property? Kyle's lawyer whispered frantically to him. Finally, Kyle muttered, No, Your Honor. I'm sorry. What was that? No, Kyle said louder. Judge Richardson's gavel came down like a gunshot. I'm issuing an immediate order of possession to Marcus Webb. The defendants have until 2 p.m. today to vacate the premises. Sheriff's Department will enforce if necessary. She wasn't done. Furthermore, I'm awarding Mr. Webb $25,000 in damages, plus legal fees, plus any additional damages to be determined at a later hearing. And Mr. Brenner? Her eyes locked on the sweaty lawyer. Tell your clients they're fortunate. I can't hold them in contempt for wasting this court's time. They're free to leave, but I suggest they do so quickly, before the criminal fraud charges the DA is filing catch up to. Another slam of the gavel. We're adjourned. The gallery erupted in cheers. Marcus sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Jennifer Park squeezed his shoulder. It's over, Marcus. Your house is yours again. Behind them, the bikers were celebrating. Frank pulled Marcus into a crushing hug. Welcome home, brother. By 11:30 a.m., they were back at Pinewood Drive. The 300 bikers had returned, engines rumbling in triumph. News crews had multiplied. Every major outlet in Pennsylvania was covering the conclusion of this story. Frank walked up to Marcus's front door with the official eviction order in his hand. He knocked, formal and controlled. Kyle Sanders opened it, his face haggard. All the confidence, all the mockery, all the bravado completely gone. Eviction order, Frank said, handing him the paper. You have until 2 p.m. I suggest you start packing. Kyle looked at the document, then at Frank, then at the 300 bikers filling the street. Something inside him broke. We're going, he said quietly. We're leaving now. What followed was the most humiliating 3 hours of Kyle Sanders' life. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of people, news helicopters circling overhead, and countless cameras recording every moment, the 4 squatters carried their belongings to a beaten-up sedan. Nobody helped them. Nobody said a word. The crowd just watched in absolute silence. When the blonde woman tried to take one of Marcus's lamps, Maria simply cleared her throat and pointed at it. The woman put it back. When the younger guy tried to grab Marcus's tools from the garage, Wrench just stood there, blocking the door with his arms crossed. The guy retreated, empty-handed. At 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the deadline, Kyle climbed into the driver's seat. The engine turned over. The car pulled away from the curb. And as it disappeared down Pinewood Drive, 300 bikers erupted in celebration. Engines revved in triumph. Horns honked. Men and women cheered and hugged each other. The sound of victory echoed through the neighborhood. Marcus stood in his driveway, holding the keys to his house keys that a locksmith had changed that morning, donated his services free of charge, and stared at his front door. His home? Frank approached quietly. Ready? Marcus looked at him, tears streaming down his face. Let's go home. Marcus's hand trembled as he slid the new key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The door swung open. He stepped inside his house for the first time in 5 days. The place was a disaster. Trash everywhere. Walls scuffed and dirty. His furniture moved, broken, or missing entirely. The kitchen was filthy. His bedroom, he couldn't even look at where Kyle had slept in his bed. But before despair could set in, Frank's voice came from behind him. We're not done yet. Marcus turned to find not just Frank, but dozens of iron wolves streaming through the door carrying cleaning supplies, toolboxes, paint cans, and industrial-strength garbage bags. What are you? Did you think we'd leave the job half-finished? Doc asked, already tying back his sleeves. We're getting your house back to the way it was. Better, actually. What happened over the next 6 hours was something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. Tommy and 5 others hauled out every piece of trash the squatters had left, filling a dumpster that had mysteriously appeared in the driveway. A woman named Jackie, who turned out to be a professional cleaner, organized a scrubbing team that attacked the kitchen and bathrooms with fury. Wrench and his crew repaired the broken window in the living room, replacing it with expert precision. Maria coordinated volunteers, cleaning walls, vacuuming carpets, organizing rooms. Frank himself worked on the front porch, repainting the railings that had been damaged, working slowly and carefully as if each brushstroke mattered. A biker named Lou, who owned a furniture store, showed up. With a truck. Heard you might need a new mattress. Can't have you sleeping on what those criminals touched. Marcus tried to protest the cost, but Lou waved him off. Already paid for. Consider it a welcome home gift. In the backyard, someone repaired the fence. Another group mowed the lawn and replanted the garden that had been trampled. Karen's favorite roses, which Marcus had thought were destroyed, were carefully tended back to health. By 6 p.m., the transformation was complete. Floors mopped and vacuumed. Walls scrubbed clean. Windows gleaming. Kitchen spotless. Every room restored to exactly how Marcus remembered it, or better. Frank found Marcus standing in Karen's old workshop in the garage, staring at her tools that had been returned to their proper places. In his hands, Marcus held a photo of Karen in her Marine Corps uniform. The frame was cracked, but the photo was intact. Found it under some boxes in the corner, Frank said quietly. Thought you'd want it back. I don't know how to thank you, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Any of you. What you've done. You don't need to thank us. Frank interrupted gently. This is what brothers do. He reached into his vest and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Marcus saw it was a leather patch from the Iron Wolves' 2003 Iraq deployment, the unit they'd served with together. We made this for you 20 years ago, Frank said. After you got hit by that IED. Every member of our squad signed it. We were going to give it to you at the hospital, but you got transferred stateside before we could. He held it out. I think it's time you had it. Marcus took the patch with shaking hands. There, embroidered around the Iron Wolves logo, were signatures from men he'd served with. Some had survived. Some hadn't. All were brothers. Frank pulled out a hammer and nail. May I? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Frank nailed the patch to the doorframe of Karen's workshop, right at eye level. A permanent reminder. A promise. A symbol. Your home is protected now. Frank said simply. Always will be. Any trouble, you call. We're family. Outside, the bikers were mounting their bikes, preparing to leave. Neighbors had come out to thank them, to shake hands, to take photos. Mrs. Chen brought out a tray of cookies she'd baked. Mr. Velasquez saluted each biker individually. The Patterson kids asked for autographs. Marcus walked outside with Frank, watching as 300 engines roared to life. One final time, a symphony of power and brotherhood and triumph. Frank climbed onto his bike, then paused and looked back at Marcus's house. Clean, restored, safe. He raised his fist in salute. Marcus raised his back, tears streaming down his face. Then, with a thunderous rumble that echoed through the neighborhood like a blessing, like a promise, like a battle cry, the Iron Wolves and their allied clubs rode away into the sunset. Their mission complete. Marcus stood in his driveway, watching them go. Behind him, his house stood clean and whole. On the workshop doorframe, the patch caught the fading light. Iron Wolves, 2003 Iraq deployment, signed by brothers who never forgot. Marcus looked up at the sky, at the orange and purple sunset that Karen had always loved, and he could almost hear her voice. "You found your family again," she'd say. "I'm proud of you." He'd found more than that. He'd found proof that good people still exist, that brotherhood doesn't expire, that some families are forged in fire and war and loyalty, and those bonds can never be broken. And that when you're a Marine, when you're part of the brotherhood, you never fight alone, not ever. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a letter from the district attorney's office. Kyle Sanders and his 3 accomplices had been arrested on multiple charges: fraud, forgery, identity theft, property destruction, and theft. Further investigation revealed they targeted 11 other veterans across Pennsylvania with the same scam. All 11 victims were getting their homes back. The case was going to trial, and the DA expected lengthy prison sentences. Marcus also received something else: a vest. It arrived in a package from Frank, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. A black leather vest with the Iron Wolves patch on the back. And on the front, embroidered in gold thread, Marcus Webb, Marine Corps, Iraq veteran brother. The note inside was simple: "You've always been one of us. Now you have the colors to prove it." Hammer that Saturday, Marcus rode to the Iron Wolves clubhouse for the first time in 3 years. His legs still hurt, probably always would, but he'd gotten a new bike, a Harley with extra modifications to help with his disability. When he pulled into the parking lot, wearing his vest, every biker there stood up and saluted. Frank walked over, grinning. "Welcome home, brother." Marcus looked around at the faces of men and women who'd dropped everything to fight for him, who'd stood with him when the system failed him, who'd restored his home and his faith in humanity. "It's good to be home," Marcus said. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.